You do not need another video telling you to work harder. You do not need another speech about discipline from someone whose entire business depends on making you feel temporarily fired up and permanently unchanged. You need someone to tell you the truth you have been able to avoid because modern life makes avoidance look normal. You are not falling behind because you are unlucky. You are not stuck because you lack talent. You are not exhausted because the world is too competitive. You are losing pieces of your life because you have trained yourself to escape the second life gets uncomfortable, and you do it so often that it no longer feels like a decision. It feels like personality. It feels like taste. It feels like self-care. It feels like taking a break. It feels like being realistic. It feels like staying informed. It feels like rewarding yourself. It feels like preparing. It feels like waiting for the right mood. It feels like being human. It is none of those things. It is a habit, a quiet habit, a modern habit, a habit so socially accepted that people will defend it while it is actively draining their money, flattening their ambition, and teaching their brain to choose relief over reality every single day. That is what makes it dangerous. A visible enemy can be fought. An invisible habit becomes a lifestyle. And once it becomes a lifestyle, it starts writing the story of your future without asking your permission. That is why this book hits like a warning siren. You are losing your life to this one habit. And next to it, the line that makes most people stop scrolling for a reason they cannot explain: what the rich get rid of first before they ever become successful. Stay with this until the end, because the final shift in this idea changes the way you look at money, effort, technology, and even your own personality. If this hits harder than the usual recycled advice, subscribe now so you do not lose this kind of thinking in a feed designed to bury anything that asks more from you than a quick reaction. And when you realize exactly what this habit has been costing you, comment the word awake. Not for me, for yourself. So you stop pretending you did not see it. The book does not begin with money. That is why it works. Most people try to fix their finances at the level of budgeting, income, savings apps, side gigs, and productivity systems. They keep searching for a better tactic, while a deeper pattern keeps sabotaging every tactic they touch. The pattern is reactive comfort. That phrase matters. Not comfort by itself. Comfort is not evil. Rest is not weakness. Pleasure is not the problem. The problem is reactive comfort. The reflex to run toward anything that softens discomfort before discomfort has had the chance to do its job. Discomfort has a job. It tells you where your life needs attention. It tells you where your standards are too low. It tells you where you are avoiding a decision. It tells you where your spending is emotional. It tells you where your habits are embarrassing. It tells you where your relationships are performative. It tells you where your work is shallow. It tells you where your confidence is fake. It tells you where your time is being stolen. But if the second discomfort appears, you reach for distraction, delay, shopping, snacks, noise, scrolling, a new tab, a new subscription, a new excuse, a new plan, a new video, a new fantasy, or a fresh hit of stimulation. Then discomfort never gets to finish its sentence. You interrupt reality before reality can teach you anything. That is the habit. And once you see it everywhere. You see it when someone opens an AI assistant and asks it to design the perfect life system, then ignores the system because following it would require doing boring work without applause. You see it when someone gets a raise and instantly upgrades the apartment, the car payment, the wardrobe, the travel expectations, the food delivery routine, and the monthly subscriptions. Not because life improved, but because extra money created extra emotional permission. You see it when someone claims they are building a side hustle, but spends most of the week bouncing between logos, tool stacks, strategy threads, creator podcasts, analytics dashboards, and dopamine disguised as research. You see it when someone says they are too drained to work on themselves, then somehow finds 3 hours for short-form content so fast and frictionless that the brain mistakes consumption for recovery. You see it when people say the market is unstable, AI is changing jobs, the economy is unpredictable, everything is expensive, nothing feels safe, and all of that is true. But instead of becoming sharper, they become more soothing, more impulsive, more dependent on small comforts they can afford right now, at the cost of the freedom they will need later. That is the trap. This book argues that the people who build wealth, focus, and real momentum are not superhuman. They are not born with steel nerves and robotic self-control. They simply notice this habit early and refuse to let it become their operating system. They stopped obeying mood. They stopped treating every discomfort like an emergency. They stopped buying relief with money they needed for leverage. They stopped renting their attention to platforms that profit from mental fragmentation. They stopped using technology as an escape tunnel and started using it as a tool. That last difference is becoming one of the biggest dividing lines of 2026. The gap is no longer only between rich and poor. The gap is increasingly between people who use technology intentionally and people who are used by it. One person opens AI to remove friction from meaningful work. Another opens AI to simulate progress so they can feel productive without confronting the work itself. One person uses automation to save time and deepen focus. Another uses automation to fill every gap with more output pressure, more comparison, more digital noise, and more reasons to feel behind. One person uses short-form content like a vending machine for occasional entertainment. Another lets it train the nervous system to expect novelty every 15 seconds, and then wonders why reading, thinking, and building anything substantial feels unbearable. One person sees online status as a cheap costume. Another spends real money trying to buy that costume, and then calls the anxiety self-expression. The habit hides inside all of this. Reactive comfort is not just scrolling. It is the need to escape friction before friction becomes growth. It is the impulse to spend when feeling uncertain. It is the urge to consume when feeling inadequate. It is the habit of delaying a difficult conversation and then numbing the guilt with entertainment. It is buying something because the checkout screen gives a tiny hit of control during a week where you feel invisible. It is telling yourself you deserve a treat every time life asks for restraint. It is opening 5 productivity apps instead of doing one unpleasant task. It is building a whole identity around potential so you never have to measure actual output. It is doom-scrolling job market panic while doing nothing to strengthen your position inside that market. It is endlessly optimizing morning routines while your evenings remain a landfill of fatigue, food delivery, random browsing, and impulse spending. It is calling yourself overwhelmed when the deeper truth is that you are undertrained and facing boredom, uncertainty, and delayed reward. That sentence alone explains why this habit destroys both ambition and money at the same time. Ambition requires the ability to stay in contact with discomfort long enough to turn it into action. Money requires the ability to delay relief long enough to direct resources toward freedom instead of soothing feelings. Reactive comfort attacks both. It weakens your capacity to stay with hard things, and it keeps redirecting your cash toward whatever offers fast emotional relief. So even when you earn more, you do not feel more powerful. You feel more padded. You feel more maintained. You feel more trapped in a nicer version of the same loop. That is why so many people are earning more than they used to and still feel poor. Not always poor in income. Poor in control. Poor in margin. Poor in patience. Poor in attention, poor in peace, poor in the ability to say no, poor in the ability to hold a line against themselves, poor in the ability to distinguish what feels good now from what will matter later. The book is ruthless about one point. The first wealth move is not making more. It is removing the habit that automatically spends energy, time, and money every time reality becomes uncomfortable. That idea is brutal, because it exposes how much modern culture encourages this behavior. Every platform is designed to reduce friction. Every brand wants to become your emotional shortcut. Every payment system wants spending to feel invisible. Every entertainment feed wants the next hit to arrive before reflection begins. Every creator economy success story tempts you to think you should always be producing, posting, monetizing, and scaling. Every trend whispers that rest means spending, confidence means displaying, and progress means looking busy. Even language has been softened to protect the habit. Emotional spending becomes treating yourself. Avoidance becomes protecting your peace. Impulse purchases become little joys. Chronic distraction becomes staying connected. Status spending becomes investing in yourself. Burnout shopping becomes deserved recovery. Low-value entertainment becomes decompressing. Endless tool hunting becomes learning. You can rename a leak, but the leak still empties the tank. And the people who get ahead do something most people find almost offensive. They stop negotiating with the part of themselves that always wants immediate comfort. Not forever, not in some miserable, joyless way. They just stop letting that part drive the car. This is where the book becomes psychologically sharp instead of preachy. It does not say your problem is laziness. It says your nervous system has been trained. That is a very different accusation. Lazy people do not usually feel guilty. Trained people do. Trained people know what they should do, but their brain has learned to associate discomfort with the need for instant escape. That learning came from thousands of repetitions. Open the app when you feel bored. Buy something when you feel flat. Order food when the day feels heavy. Watch one more clip when the task feels dull. Research more when action feels risky. Ask for more advice when responsibility feels close. Tidy the workspace when the real job looks too exposed. Refresh the inbox when deep work starts demanding sustained effort. Upgrade the gear when the current results threaten the self-image. This is conditioning. And once you understand that, blame becomes less useful than retraining. The book makes a point that should probably make a lot of people uncomfortable. Many adults think their personality is fixed when what they are really experiencing is a collection of rehearsed escapes. They say I am just bad with money. Maybe. But maybe you are simply fast at spending to regulate emotion. They say I am not disciplined. Maybe. But maybe your brain has been rewarded for abandoning hard things too many times. They say I have trouble focusing. Maybe, but maybe your attention span has been redesigned by years of instant novelty, algorithmic rewards, and the expectation that every moment must feel stimulating. They say I am not entrepreneurial. Maybe, but maybe you are trying to build something serious with a nervous system that panics the second progress stops feeling exciting. They say I do not have confidence. Maybe, but maybe your self-trust is low, because you keep watching yourself choose relief over the actions you said mattered. That last one is devastating. Confidence is not built by affirmations. Confidence is built when you watch yourself stay. Stay with a task. Stay with the number in the bank account without escaping into fantasy. Stay with the difficult truth that your spending is not random. Stay with the fact that your calendar reveals what your values actually are. Stay with the boring middle of improvement where nothing is dramatic enough to post. Stay with the silence after you close the entertainment and there is no one left to distract you from your own patterns. That is where identity changes. Because the habit of reactive comfort does not only steal external results, it teaches internal betrayal. Every time you escape too quickly, you send yourself a message. I do not trust you to handle reality. I do not trust you to sit still with uncertainty. I do not trust you to feel discomfort without buying something, consuming something, or postponing something. I do not trust you to build a future larger than your current mood. After enough repetitions, that message becomes a self-concept. Now you do not just avoid discomfort. You identify as someone who avoids discomfort. And once identity gets involved, people defend the cage that is hurting them. That is why this book does not waste time on surface-level hacks. It goes deeper. It asks what happens to a person who learns that every uncomfortable feeling must be neutralized immediately. The answer is that this person becomes expensive to maintain. Expensive in money because relief keeps costing something. Expensive in time because every meaningful task gets broken into fragments. Expensive in energy because avoidance creates mental clutter that never fully disappears. Expensive in opportunity because the person cannot stay steady long enough to compound anything. and expensive in dignity because they begin shaping life around what is easiest to tolerate rather than what is most important to build. That sentence explains half of modern adulthood. A lot of people are not designing life around values. They are designing life around what feels easiest to avoid right now. That is why people stay in jobs they hate while spending aggressively to compensate for the emotional damage of those jobs. That is why people say they want freedom while taking on recurring expenses that require permanent obedience. That is why people buy image upgrades in years when they should be buying time, skills, and breathing room. That is why people invest more into appearing successful online than becoming privately difficult to shake. That is why side hustles collapse before they mature. Not because the idea was terrible, but because the creator built it with a brain trained to flee the second consistency stopped feeling glamorous. You can see this clearly in the creator economy. A lot of people do not want leverage. They want evidence. Evidence that they matter, evidence that they are interesting, evidence that they are not being left behind, evidence that the world sees them. That hunger is understandable, but when it is unexamined, it turns technology into a mirror addiction. Now every post becomes an emotional referendum. Every slow week becomes an identity crisis. Every algorithm shift feels personal. Every piece of silence feels like failure. And because creating from clarity is harder than reacting for validation, people start optimizing for emotional survival instead of meaningful work. They chase formats they do not respect. They publish things they do not stand behind. They buy gear to feel real. They copy trends to feel safe. They call it strategy, but much of the time it is just reactive comfort wearing business clothes. The book tears into that pattern because it is everywhere. It is in office jobs. It is in freelancing. It is in e-commerce. It is in content creation. It is in investing. It is in relationships. It is in health. It is in how people eat, text, buy, postpone, justify, and imagine. Think about job insecurity in an AI-shaped market. This is real. Roles are changing, expectations are changing, entry points are changing, entire categories of work are being compressed, assisted, or redefined. That uncertainty should push people toward clarity, skill depth, adaptability, and financial caution. But for many, it pushes them toward the opposite. More panic spending because stress feels unbearable. More passive consumption because agency feels far away. More public performance because private progress feels too slow. More dependence on convenience because mental bandwidth feels low. More shallow courses, tools, templates, and subscriptions because buying possibility feels safer than doing difficult practice. This is one of the smartest ideas in the book. When a future feels unstable, people often become more loyal to short-term comfort, not less. That sounds irrational until you understand the psychology. If tomorrow feels uncertain, the brain becomes more tempted to collect relief today. That is why lifestyle inflation often follows success and fear at the same time. Someone earns more and thinks finally, I can breathe. But instead of using new income to create margin, reduce obligations, and strengthen optionality, they start upgrading identity through consumption. Better apartment, better aesthetic, better restaurants, better gadgets, better vacations, better versions of things that other people can see. Why? Because when internal stability is weak, external upgrades feel like proof. Proof that the effort meant something. Proof that the sacrifice is paying off. Proof that they are moving. Proof that they are not average. But status purchases are often rented certainty. They look strong and behave fragile. They impress strangers and trap owners. They signal success while reducing freedom. This is why the line beside the book matters so much. What the rich get rid of first before they ever become successful. This does not mean rich people never enjoy life. It means people who actually build durable wealth usually remove the habit of paying for emotional relief before they start paying for visible status. They stop spending to anesthetize. They stop rewarding themselves for surviving a week they keep recreating. They stop letting mood write the shopping list. They stop confusing convenience with quality of life. They stop thinking more tools will solve a character problem. They stop treating every desire like a command. They stop proving things to audiences who are too distracted to remember anyway. They stop outsourcing boredom, effort, loneliness, and self-doubt to purchases. That is how leverage begins. Not with a luxury item, with a refusal. A refusal to keep financing the habits that make freedom impossible. The book uses money as a mirror more than a goal. That is important. Because most people think their spending reveals what they like. It reveals much more than that. It reveals how they regulate emotion. Look at where money goes after a stressful day. Look at what gets purchased after rejection. Look at what gets upgraded after envy. Look at what gets justified after boredom. Look at which payments continue only because cancellation would force an honest review of who you are and what you actually use. Subscription fatigue is a perfect example of modern self-deception. People do not only pay for services now, they pay to maintain versions of themselves. The reader version, the athlete version, the trader version, the language learner version, the calm person version, the organized person version, the creator version, the optimized person version. One monthly charge for each imagined identity. Then they wonder why there is pressure, clutter, guilt, and a strange sense of being busy without feeling alive. Because each subscription becomes a silent contract with a self they are not currently inhabiting. And instead of confronting that gap directly, they keep paying for the fantasy of eventual alignment. That is reactive comfort too. A softer one, a cleaner one, a more respectable one, but still an escape. The same applies to productivity culture. The 2026 version of procrastination often looks impressive. It is not lying on a couch doing nothing. It is comparing note-taking systems. It is testing AI workflows. It is updating dashboards. It is tagging tasks. It is consuming expert opinions. It is learning new frameworks. It is watching 12 clips on deep work while never entering a deep work state long enough to notice your own resistance. This is fake productivity, and it is especially dangerous because it protects the self-image. You still feel like someone who cares. You still feel intelligent. You still feel engaged. You still feel serious. But the output remains thin because the real barrier was never a missing system. It was the inability to remain in contact with boring, uncertain, repetitive, unglamorous effort without needing immediate emotional compensation. This book keeps returning to that point because everything branches from it. The quality of your finances depends on what you do when you feel deprived. The quality of your career depends on what you do when results are delayed. The quality of your body depends on what you do when craving is loud. The quality of your mind depends on what you do when silence arrives and nothing distracts you. The quality of your relationships depends on what you do when honesty becomes uncomfortable. The quality of your future depends less on your grand intentions than on your micro-reactions to friction. That is why the habit is invisible to most people. It hides in the small moment before the choice. The moment nobody posts. The moment nobody praises. The moment before the hand reaches for the phone. The moment before the tab opens. The moment before the purchase. The moment before the snack. The moment before the excuse. The moment before the delay. The moment before the soft surrender that feels harmless because it only lasts 5 minutes. Lives are altered there. Not in one dramatic collapse. In tiny rehearsals of escape. That is the part most viewers will feel in their chest. Because they know it is true. They know what it is like to say they need to save more, focus more, build more, learn more, become more stable, and then watch themselves leak strength through 100 avoidable reactions. If that sounds like you, do not rush past this because it hurts. Like the video now. Not as a favor to me, but as a line in the sand against passive consumption. Use the action to mark the moment you stopped watching this as entertainment and started listening like your habits have consequences, because they do. The book then makes a turn that changes everything. It says the opposite of reactive comfort is not pain. It is contact. That is such an important distinction. This is not a philosophy of punishment. It is a philosophy of staying in contact with reality long enough for reality to become usable. Contact with your bank account instead of numbing the numbers. Contact with the skill gap instead of hiding in inspiration. Contact with the actual state of your work instead of the story you tell about your potential. Contact with your calendar instead of your intentions. Contact with your body instead of your cravings. Contact with the relationship instead of the curated image of the relationship. Contact with loneliness instead of compulsive digital company. Contact with uncertainty instead of shopping for certainty. Contact with boredom instead of panicking and reaching for stimulation. Contact with the part of the task that has no novelty left and therefore reveals whether you truly want the outcome or only like the fantasy. This is why the book feels different from empty self-help. It does not tell you to become a machine. It tells you to become harder to seduce away from what matters. That is a much more relevant goal in 2026. The world does not mainly need your labor anymore. It wants your attention, your reactions, your cravings, your insecurity, and your wallet. It wants your fragmenting mind, because a fragmented mind is easier to sell to. A person who can stay with discomfort becomes harder to manipulate, harder to advertise to, harder to algorithmically hook, harder to socially pressure, harder to shame into status spending, harder to trap inside recurring obligations, harder to push into endless low-value urgency, harder to own. That is where money and psychology finally merge. Financial freedom is not only an economic condition, it is also a behavioral one. You can earn a lot and still behave like a captive. You can have opportunities and still react like a hostage to mood. You can use cutting-edge tools and still let the cheapest impulse run the day. That is why some people grow income and stay fragile, and why other people, sometimes without flashy lives, become increasingly solid. They are not merely acquiring assets. They are reducing internal dependency on immediate relief. That reduction changes everything. It changes how you work because boring tasks stop feeling insulting. It changes how you save because delayed reward stops feeling like deprivation. It changes how you spend because purchases stop serving as emotional repair. It changes how you learn because confusion stops feeling like a sign you should quit. It changes how you create because silence, low engagement, and slow progress stop feeling like evidence that you are nothing. It changes how you relate to AI because you stop asking it to replace judgment and start using it to amplify deliberate effort. That is one of the strongest 2026 examples in the book. People now have access to tools that can think with them, draft for them, organize for them, research for them, simulate options for them, and accelerate almost any process. Yet many feel more scattered than ever. Why? Because external intelligence does not repair internal avoidance. If anything, it can magnify it. Now you can automate the appearance of progress while still dodging the emotional experience of building anything real. You can ask AI to generate a business plan, a diet plan, a learning path, a content calendar, a budgeting framework, a personal brand strategy, a resume rewrite, a networking script, a savings target, a weekly schedule, and a morning routine. And all of it can look smart. But if you are still controlled by reactive comfort, the plan will join the graveyard of perfect tools abandoned the moment execution becomes repetitive, slow, and emotionally unspectacular. That is not a technology problem. That is a contact problem. The book says something powerful here. The future will not belong to the people with the most tools. It will belong to the people who can hold a line against themselves while using those tools. That line might be as simple as keeping one promise tonight, not 5. 1. Finish the unpleasant task before opening entertainment. Review the account balance before buying anything else. Cancel the subscriptions that belong to fantasy identities. Sit with the urge to order, click, scroll, or avoid for 10 minutes without obeying it. Write the message you have been postponing. Do the hour of focused work without changing environments, apps, playlists, notebooks, or strategies halfway through. Tell the truth about what you are doing with your evenings. The book is full of these moments because it understands something people rarely say out loud. A life usually changes at the point of tolerated discomfort, not at the point of inspiration. Inspiration is cheap. The internet is drowning in it. Clarity is harder. Contact is harder. Restraint is harder. Staying is harder. And because it is harder, it is more valuable. There is also a social dimension that makes this message cut deeper. A lot of people are exhausted not because they are weak, but because they are living inside a public theater. They feel pressure to look successful, informed, funny, attractive, desirable, productive, emotionally evolved, financially literate, physically fit, and creatively active all at once. Every platform adds another costume. Every algorithm rewards another performance. Every comparison point expands the list of things a person feels they should already be. Reactive comfort thrives in that environment. Why would someone face reality calmly when reality now includes the illusion that thousands of other people are somehow living cleaner, richer, sharper, more beautiful lives? So the escape habit grows. More browsing, more shopping, more low-stakes stimulation, more image management, more fantasy consumption, more tiny indulgences, more private chaos under public polish. This is why emotional spending disguised as self-care has exploded. People are not always buying objects. They are buying temporary relief from comparison. A package arrives, and for a moment the day has shape again. A premium service is activated, and for a moment the future seems handled. A better outfit is purchased, and for a moment insecurity quiets down. A restaurant bill lands, and for a moment the week feels earned. A new device is delivered, and for a moment the self-image updates. But moments do not compound unless they are attached to structure. And relief that relies on spending is one of the most expensive ways to remain emotionally unstable. The book never says, do not enjoy nice things. It says, stop using nice things as medication for problems you refuse to face directly. That is the difference between pleasure and dependence. Between taste and sedation. Between quality and compensation. Between a reward and a rescue. That distinction matters in relationships too. Reactive comfort does not only make people buy differently, it makes them connect differently. They avoid necessary conversations because they want peace now. They keep vague arrangements because clarity might disappoint them. They stay half-committed because fully deciding would expose them. They text for distraction and call it intimacy. They collect attention and call it chemistry. They maintain social contact that keeps loneliness away just enough to prevent real solitude from teaching them anything. Again, the pattern is the same. Escape the discomfort before it becomes information. That is why the book feels like it is talking about everything at once, while actually talking about one thing. A person who cannot stay in contact with discomfort will struggle in money, work, love, health, learning, and self-respect. Because all meaningful growth passes through periods that do not feel good at first. The people who rise are often not the people with the brightest beginning. They are the people who stop treating discomfort like a signal to exit. There is a sentence in the logic of this book that should probably be written on a wall. You do not become powerful by adding more comfort to your life. You become powerful by needing less comfort in order to do what matters. That does not mean living badly. It means becoming less emotionally blackmailed by your own cravings. Think about how radical that is. A person who does not need to feel motivated before acting has an advantage. A person who does not need recognition to keep building has an advantage. A person who does not need to buy relief after every stressful day has an advantage. A person who does not need constant novelty to stay engaged has an advantage. A person who does not need to look successful in order to quietly become stable has an advantage. These advantages rarely go viral because they are not flashy, but they compound harder than charisma, harder than hype, harder than style without substance. The book then moves into a practical shift that feels almost embarrassingly simple, which is probably why most people never do it. Replace the question, what do I feel like doing, with what am I trying to protect by avoiding this? That question cuts through lies fast. Why do you keep checking your phone in the middle of important work? Maybe you are protecting yourself from the discomfort of sustained effort. Why are you buying something you did not plan for? Maybe you are protecting yourself from feeling deprived, overlooked, or behind. Why are you spending another hour consuming advice? Maybe you are protecting yourself from the exposure of trying and finding out where you really stand. Why are you saying you need a break when the day barely contained any deep output? Maybe you are protecting yourself from the confrontation that your mind now struggles to tolerate the kind of focus your goals require. Why are you adding another subscription, course, or tool? Maybe you are protecting yourself from the simpler truth that what you need is repetition, not novelty. Once a person begins asking that question, the habit loses some of its camouflage. Now the purchase is not just a purchase. It is a mood strategy. The delay is not just delay. It is self-protection. The entertainment binge is not just entertainment. It is avoidance. The compulsive planning is not just responsibility. It is fear dressed up as preparation. This level of honesty is what makes the book dangerous in the best way. It removes your favorite hiding places, and then it gives you a replacement identity that is stronger than generic discipline. Not a grinder, not a hustler, not a machine, a person who can remain in contact. That identity is humane. It allows joy. It allows rest. It allows pleasure. It allows softness, but it refuses reflex. It refuses automatic escape. It refuses to let every internal weather change dictate behavior. That is how someone becomes trustworthy to themselves again. And once self-trust starts returning, financial behavior changes almost by consequence. You stop spending for version management. You stop trying to repair bad weeks with packages. You stop turning boredom into browsing. You stop treating a salary increase like permission to inflate your life. You start valuing margin more than appearance. You start respecting cash as stored choice, not just spending power. You start noticing how many purchases were really attempts to alter feeling states. You start asking whether this expense buys freedom or only sensation. That question alone can save people years. Does this buy freedom or only sensation? Freedom looks like lower fixed costs. Freedom looks like savings that create room to think. Freedom looks like skills that widen options. Freedom looks like fewer things to maintain. Freedom looks like less image pressure. Freedom looks like a nervous system that does not need constant reward to keep moving. Sensation looks like the rush of now. The delivery, the upgrade, the swipe, the treat, the flex. The rush disappears. The obligation stays. That is the economic side. But the emotional side might matter even more. When you stop obeying reactive comfort, you start getting your life back in units much larger than money. You get back mornings that are not instantly hijacked by your phone. You get back evenings that are not dissolved by passive consumption. You get back entire weekends that would have been lost to digital drift and recovery spending. You get back attention. You get back memory. You get back the ability to read for an hour and actually absorb something. You get back the capacity to sit in a room without needing a second screen. You get back the strange, powerful experience of finishing things. You get back a relationship with time that does not feel like constant leakage. This is why the book says people are losing their life to this one habit, not merely their money. Because money can sometimes be rebuilt quickly. A year of attention lost in fragments feels different. A decade of reflexive avoidance feels different. A personality organized around escape feels different. That kind of loss is harder to explain and more painful to admit. A person wakes up one day and realizes they did not exactly choose the shape of their life. They reacted into it. Reacted into debt. Reacted into superficial busyness. Reacted into brittle confidence. Reacted into postponed goals. Reacted into a consumer identity. Reacted into career drift. Reacted into friendships built on convenience rather than depth. Reacted into an apartment full of things that solved feelings for minutes and created maintenance for years. That realization can hurt. Good. Some pain is not damage. Some pain is the return of feeling after numbness. Some pain is awareness finally entering the room. Do not run from that part. This is the moment where most people would reach for comfort again. A snack, a purchase, a new tab, a different video, a quick message, a scroll, a plan to change everything tomorrow. That is the test. Can you stay with the recognition without immediately converting it into a soothing ritual? If you can, even for a few minutes, something changes. You prove to yourself that discomfort is survivable. That fact sounds small until you realize most weak decisions are made by people trying to escape emotions they have never fully practiced surviving. The book explains that the rich get rid of this habit early, not because they are morally better, but because leverage requires stability. To invest, you need patience. To build, you need repetition. To save, you need restraint. To learn, you need humility. To scale, you need consistency through dull phases. To lead, you need the ability to stay calm when reality is not flattering. Reactive comfort destroys all of that. It makes patience feel like deprivation. It makes repetition feel like punishment. It makes restraint feel like loss. It makes humility feel like threat. It makes dull phases feel like dead ends. It makes unflattering reality feel intolerable. So the person keeps escaping and calls the results bad luck. This is where the message becomes almost surgical. The book says the true cost of reactive comfort is not the comfort itself. It is the standards you slowly lower in order to keep protecting it. You lower the standard for what counts as a focused day. You lower the standard for what counts as saving money. You lower the standard for what counts as effort. You lower the standard for what counts as honesty. You lower the standard for what counts as recovery. You lower the standard for what counts as progress. You lower the standard for what counts as enough. Soon your life is full of almosts. Almost focused, almost consistent, almost stable, almost serious, almost ready, almost in control, almost becoming the person you keep describing. That is why the message feels exposing. Because many people are not blocked by lack of opportunity. They are blocked by how often they interrupt their own seriousness with self-soothing. If this is landing, subscribe before you forget it inside the next wave of content. Most feeds are built to keep you emotionally reactive. This kind of message does the opposite. It demands that you become harder to move. That is rare. Keep it near you. The book also addresses a hidden fear behind the habit. A lot of people are terrified that if they stop escaping discomfort, life will become gray and joyless. That fear keeps them loyal to small indulgences, even when those indulgences are obviously controlling them. But the truth is almost the reverse. When you stop using comfort as a reflex, actual pleasure becomes cleaner. Food tastes better when it is not being used to mute stress. Entertainment becomes better when it is chosen instead of compulsive. Purchases feel better when they reflect value instead of neediness. Rest feels better when it follows effort instead of replacing it. Technology becomes better when it serves intention instead of hijacking it. Even leisure becomes richer when your brain is not fried by constant stimulation. Reactive comfort does not increase joy. It blunts it. It turns pleasure into maintenance. It turns treats into routines. It turns rewards into dependencies. It turns options into obligations. It turns convenience into entitlement. It turns the nervous system into a customer service desk that complains every time reality is not immediately smooth. The book wants to restore contrast, work and rest, effort and ease, saving and spending, silence and stimulation, building and enjoying. When every discomfort is escaped, contrast disappears. Life becomes a flat stream of coping. That sentence explains why so many people feel strangely deadened despite having more access to convenience than any generation before them. Convenience solved many problems. It also removed many useful frictions. Useful frictions create discipline naturally. Waiting, walking, planning, cooking, repairing, reading slowly, being bored, sitting without input. Now many of those frictions can be bypassed instantly. That can be wonderful. It can also weaken the muscles that used to make people more durable by default. So if you want freedom now, you often have to choose certain frictions on purpose. Not fake suffering, chosen friction, a budget you actually look at, a workspace where one thing gets done, an hour with notifications off, a walk without a feed, a night without impulse buying, a weekend where you do not outsource boredom to endless entertainment, a month where extra income does not instantly become upgraded lifestyle, a conversation you stop postponing, a skill you practice long after the excitement wears off. This is how the replacement mindset takes form. Not by dreaming bigger, by escaping less. That is such a clean idea. and it cuts through so much nonsense. Most people keep trying to add new tactics to lives built on automatic retreat. The book says remove the retreat and your tactics start working. Remove the retreat and your plans survive Tuesday. Remove the retreat and your money stops vanishing through emotional side doors. Remove the retreat and your attention stops behaving like rented property. Remove the retreat and your effort finally has a chance to compound. There is also a part of this message that speaks directly to people who feel ashamed of how much time they have lost. They think it is too late. They think the habit is too deep. They think their brain is permanently damaged by years of short-form loops, convenience dependence, overspending, overthinking, and fragmented focus. The book refuses that fatalism. Not with childish optimism, with something more grounded. What has been trained can be retrained. Slowly, uncomfortably, without spectacle. You do not heal a reactive life with one dramatic vow. You heal it by interrupting the reflex enough times that a new self begins to form. That new self does not emerge through declarations. It emerges through evidence. You feel the urge and do not obey it. You open the shopping cart and close it. You touch the phone and put it down. You feel uncertainty and do the work anyway. You review your finances without escaping into fantasy. You let boredom exist without medicating it. You choose the skill over the image. You choose margin over display. You choose depth over stimulation. You choose contact over comfort. Again and again. At first it feels small, almost insulting. Surely a better life requires more than this. But that reaction is part of the old habit too. It wants dramatic answers because dramatic answers feel exciting. Exciting answers let you delay the quiet repetition that actually changes character. The book knows that. It keeps dragging the reader back to the mundane battleground where real lives are won or wasted. The hour after work, the first 20 minutes of the morning, the moment after disappointment, the moment after praise, the moment after payment arrives, the moment after boredom appears, the moment after shame, the moment after envy, the moment after you tell yourself I deserve something. Especially that one. Because sometimes you do deserve something. The question is, what? Do you deserve another reflex that weakens tomorrow? Or do you deserve the dignity of not being controlled so easily? That is the voice this book uses. Not cruel, not soft, clear. It respects the viewer enough to say what many people are afraid to say. Your future is not mainly being destroyed by one giant mistake. It is being negotiated away by the habits you keep protecting because they make the present feel slightly easier to survive. And the more intense the world becomes, the more tempting those habits get. More notifications, more AI-generated content, more personalized feeds, more invisible payment systems, more social comparison, more monetized attention traps, more reasons to feel inadequate, more tools that promise optimization while fragmenting focus even further. The person who learns to stay in contact in this environment is not just self-disciplined. They are free in a way most people no longer understand. Not fully free. Nobody is fully free. But freer than the person whose emotions keep submitting purchase orders, time requests, and escape plans all day long. That freedom shows up in simple ways first. You can sit down and work. You can hear bad news without needing to buy relief. You can receive money without turning it into lifestyle theater. You can watch someone else succeed without panicking into comparison spending. You can feel boredom without calling it suffering. You can use AI without letting it replace your agency. You can enjoy technology without being trained by it. You can rest without spiraling into drift. You can want more without despising where you are. That kind of freedom is quieter than flex culture. It does not photograph as well. It does not always impress rooms built on appearances, but it builds people who stop collapsing under ordinary discomfort, and those people become very hard to stop over time. The ending of this idea is what makes the whole message unforgettable. The book says success begins not when you add more motivation, but when you stop funding the part of your life that keeps sabotaging you. Funding with money, funding with time, funding with attention, funding with excuses, funding with language that makes weakness sound harmless. funding with routines that keep you fragmented, funding with purchases that keep you trapped, funding with digital habits that keep you numb, funding with public performance that keeps you distracted from private truth. Defund the sabotage, and you uncover power that was already there. That is the twist. You were not necessarily missing a better self. You were overfeeding the worse reflex. That is why the message feels both severe and strangely hopeful, because it means your life might not require becoming someone entirely new. It may require stopping your daily support of the behavior that keeps making you smaller. That is a cleaner fight. Hard, but clean. And it begins in an unglamorous place. The next discomfort. Not next month, not after the right video, not after the perfect plan. The next discomfort. When it appears, do not automatically escape. Name it, feel it, learn from it, use it, let it finish its sentence. Maybe it says your spending is emotional. Maybe it says your work habits are weak. Maybe it says your goals are mostly vanity. Maybe it says your environment is built for drift. Maybe it says your standard for focus has collapsed. Maybe it says you keep buying symbols of progress because actual progress would take longer and expose more. Maybe it says the life you want will not be built by a person who needs constant soothing. Good. Now you know what to train. This is the part where most advice tries to send you out feeling pumped. That is not what this message should do. It should make you more honest, more watchful, less easily seduced, less impressed by emotional relief disguised as reward, less available to the systems that profit from your fragmentation. The real win is not becoming louder. It is becoming harder to hijack, harder to bait, harder to sell false urgency to, harder to make feel poor through comparison, harder to make spend for identity repair, harder to make mistake comfort for peace. And once you become harder to hijack, money behaves differently around you, time behaves differently around you, technology behaves differently around you, even your self-respect behaves differently around you. Because self-respect grows fastest when you stop abandoning yourself in small moments. Not when life is easy. When life is irritating, slow, uncertain, and unglamorous, and you still refuse to disappear into reaction. That is the person this book tries to create. Someone who can hold the line. Someone who can feel the pull of escape and stay anyway. Someone who can enjoy life without being devoured by appetite. Someone who can build without constant applause. Someone who can save without feeling punished. Someone who can use modern tools without becoming mentally colonized by them. Someone who stops measuring success by how comfortable the day felt and starts measuring it by how honestly they stayed in contact with what mattered. That final measure changes everything. Because some days will still be messy. Some days will still feel scattered. Some days the habit will win in small places. That is not the point. The point is that you see it now. You see the mechanism. You see how money leaks when emotion gets a credit card. You see how attention disappears when boredom becomes intolerable. You see how ambition weakens when every hard feeling triggers escape. You see how technology can either deepen your leverage or train your helplessness. You see how public image can quietly replace private progress. You see how the rich often remove the reflex for immediate relief long before outsiders notice any visible success. And once you see it, every ordinary moment becomes charged with new meaning. The checkout page is no longer neutral. The feed is no longer neutral. The impulse to upgrade is no longer neutral. The extra tab is no longer neutral. The endless research loop is no longer neutral. The casual little treat after a bad mood is no longer neutral. Each one asks the same question. Will you fund your future or finance your escape? That is the question under everything. And here is the final insight that changes the meaning of everything that came before. The habit is not dangerous only because it wastes time, weakens focus, and drains money. It is dangerous because it quietly decides what kind of life you are allowed to believe is realistic. A person who cannot tolerate discomfort starts shrinking their ambitions to match their coping style. They choose goals that fit distraction. They choose careers that fit avoidance. They choose relationships that fit emotional laziness. They choose spending patterns that fit the need for frequent relief. They choose identities that can survive without much courage. Then they call that version of life practical. It is not practical. It is adapted to escape. That is why getting rid of this habit changes more than behavior. It changes the size of the future you can finally carry. Because once you stop needing constant comfort, bigger things stop feeling impossible. A deeper skill path stops feeling too slow. A quieter financial life stops feeling embarrassing. A serious body of work stops feeling too repetitive. A real savings plan stops feeling restrictive. A private season of rebuilding stops feeling humiliating. You stop asking life to flatter you every day. And because you stop asking for that, life can start giving you something better than flattery. It can give you substance, a mind that is not so easy to scatter, a wallet that is not so easy to empty, a calendar that is not so easy to waste, a nervous system that is not so easy to bribe. That is what people sense when they meet someone who is becoming real. There is less performance, less restless proving, less need to be seen mid-process, more weight, more calm, more ability to say no without explaining, more ability to keep building while other people keep reacting. That kind of person is not lucky. That kind of person has simply stopped making comfort the ruler of every hard moment. So the next time the old pattern shows up, and it will, do not dramatize it. Just recognize the offer. A little relief now in exchange for a little more weakness later. A little escape now in exchange for a little less freedom later. A little comfort now in exchange for a little less respect for yourself later. And then make a different trade. Keep the money, keep the hour, keep the focus, keep the promise, keep your seat. Keep contact with reality long enough to let it strengthen you. That is how wealth begins before the numbers show it. That is how discipline begins before anyone praises it. That is how confidence begins before the outside world has proof. It begins in private when discomfort walks in, and you do not hand it your life. If this message found you at the right moment, subscribe and stay close to this kind of thinking, because the world is full of content that teaches reaction and very little that teaches self-command. And if you felt this in a place you have been avoiding for a long time, comment the word contact so you mark the break with the old habit in public and remember it in private. The book says you are losing your life to one habit. Now you know what that habit is. Now you know what it costs. Now you know what replaces it. Not magic, not hype, not another performance. Contact. And once contact becomes your new reflex, your time stops leaking, your money stops panicking, your attention stops begging for rescue, and your future stops being negotiated away by whatever feels good for 5 minutes. That is when your life stops being a reaction. That is when it finally starts becoming a decision.